Welcome, everyone, to EAPS, and happy Earth Day. This is the 54th anniversary of Earth Day. It started in 1970, when the world was a very different and very much dirtier place in many ways. Our air was a mess, waters were a mess, and it was beginning to be noticeable, even to politicians. In 1970, Gaylord Nelson, a Democratic senator, witnessed the, at the time, gigantic, we've had better since, oil spill off the coast of California in Santa Barbara. And he decided to do something about it and launched the first Earth Day in 1970. It was attended by 20 million Americans. At that time, perhaps even since, the largest secular demonstration ever in the world. And since then, Earth Day has become an important part of the fabric of American and global society. It led to, for example, the creation just a couple of years later under the Nixon administration of the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. And the results have been noticeable everywhere. It's hard to believe for people who weren't around in 1970, and I'm depressed to think how many people in this room actually fall into that category. But it really was a much more noticeably polluted world. We didn't make progress in eliminating these sources of pollution or reducing the environmental burden by accident. It took the initiative and brain power of a variety of people who increasingly brought to bear the tools of science, modeling, and analysis to inform policymaking and the enforcement of policy. In 1982, the group, the World Resources Institute, was created by Gus Speth and his co-founders, WRI. WRI arose from that 1970s activity and came to epitomize, in my mind, this use of data analysis and scientific rigor to inform policy and to connect the environment that we live in with the people, us, who have to live in it. And has long looked for that balance in our economic activities that still lead to a sustainable environment. Today our speaker is the head of WRI, Ani Dasgupta, who became the CEO, I guess, in the middle of COVID, after a career of 7 or 8 years at WRI running a number of programs, and then prior to that at the World Bank, where he was the Director of Knowledge and Learning and the creator of the World Bank's Knowledge and Learning Platform, which I think is a reflection of his commitment to the use of rigor and data in policymaking at every level. Under Ani, WRI has become an increasingly focused organization. And he'll describe, I think, in the course of his remarks, the sorts of things that they're focused on and why, and how hopefully we can all become part of them. And we're hoping that one of the outcomes of our gathering today will be a strong connection between our two institutions, which I think are arguably the best in their game anywhere in the world. The best thing about Ani, well, I don't know the best thing about Ani, a very good thing about Ani is that he is also a MIT graduate and a course 11 master's and PhD student and spent 10 years, I understand, at MIT over the course of his career, coming and going. It's a delight to have him here. I'm looking forward to hearing from him, and I look forward to hearing from you as well during our Q&A, which will take place following his remarks. Welcome all, and welcome Ani.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. When Rob wrote to me about coming here today, I instantly wanted to come, and I'm very glad I'm here. It's a privilege, I must say, for me to be here on Earth Day. That's not the only reason. You know, I went to MIT, as you heard. I loved it here. Just want to say all the students here, I just loved it here. And I came here in 1988 with 2 suitcases and not much else. And it was a great place to be. So that's not the only reason. I'm very proud to be here on Earth Day. For a foreign student who came here to come and speak, it's just fantastic. But the 2 other reasons I'm here that was so exciting. One is I think the mighty, I was told today it's mighty, M-I-T-I. This kind of, my whole talk is about how we need to do much more interdisciplinary thing, much more collaborative thing across the world. Not only inside a huge and important academic institution like MIT, but across the world among organizations. And my third reason I'm here is very selfish, is that I hope some of you come and work at WRI at some point in the near future. So that's my hope. So what I'm going to talk about is really transition. Our focus is the way the world is today and where it needs to go. It's actually not one thing that needs to happen. Actually, multiple needs to happen at the same time. And what the economy we have today actually have to change to a different economy. What I mean by this is simply last year, oil companies, which is about $6 trillion worth of business in the world, made $1 trillion more than they were planning. They were planning a lot. They made $1 trillion more what they were planning. About 7%, about 10% of tropical forests, there's only 7% of tropical forests left in the world, were destroyed. And the world became actually more unequal last year than the year before that. All these things actually happened legally. None of these things were illegal, because this is the system we have today that produce those outcomes. So my point is simply that it's not one thing that needs to change. The whole kind of the system we are depending on, the systems have to change, so the rules are different, and that orchestration is the transition, and that's my focus of what we're going to take. And just want to give you the gist of my story that I'm going to say in the next 30 minutes, so you're not wondering what am I saying. My whole point is that we need a very different kinds of collaboration to get those transition done among organizations, among people, among businesses, civil society, and academia. So here we go. There's a lot of slides with a lot of charts. If you can't see that, I hope you can see that's a giant screen. But do not worry if you can't see all of it. Everything here is public. This can be available. Everything we do is public. So anything you want, you can ask the organizers. They can share with you. So I don't want you to worry about it. I just want to say where we come from. You just heard from WRI. WRI was set in 1982. And WRI has been concerned about climate all this time. It's actually a lot of the infrastructure there is in the world today about discussing climate, how to measure GHG protocol. We actually set it out. Earth Day was organized by Gus, actually, how UNFCCC came to. We've been a very centrally a climate organization to bring best of science to climate discussion. 3 years back after I became CEO, we actually asked ourselves, is that the only outcome we're looking for? And we changed it to climate, people, and nature. I just want to tell you why in 3 minutes so that you know where we're coming from. So our outcome right now, we actually don't measure reduction of CO2 anymore, but is our work nature positive, and is it actually helping people, and are these 3 things happening at the same time, all the time? The reason is the following. I hope this works. One is inequality. The 2 countries in the world actually did very well. In the rich world, United States, post-COVID, and the other countries, India, in the global emerging world, these are the 2 countries who have done the better than their peers post-COVID, in growth, I mean. Both countries actually became more unequal during this process. And you can see how many people are in extreme poverty. Just because people have poverty is not the only problem, because climate change impacts actually unequally, unfairly, poor people and poorer countries more. So climate change happens everywhere, but it only impacts people who are vulnerable. And so none of you people, if you made it to this room, you will not be impacted by climate change anytime near future, because you have resources to figure out what to do about it. But the people who get impacted actually are people who don't have resources. So the reason this is important is climate change, as it goes on and impacts, is the poor people in poor countries like the United States and poorer countries that'll get, it's immensely unfair. And this thing, our belief is if we actually don't do climate policy in a way that actually helps people directly, you won't be able to do climate policy, meaning you won't be able to make progress in things. You go to Europe today, there is the protest happening in multiple capitals in Europe today on Europe's climate policy on agriculture. This is just a small example of why this will happen. The other is this. You saw this chart. This is a chart about deforestation. In Glasgow in 2021, the world said we will stop deforestation by 2030. Actually, it hasn't stopped, and it actually last year was 10%. It's very stubbornly steady. It's Brazil and Indonesia did better, but other parts of the world stubbornly steady. Why is this important? You'll say, no, we don't work on conservation. We don't worry about forests. It's because there is no net zero without nature. This chart, which is slightly complicated, the blue part, the dark blue part of the chart, is what the emission is, about 42 gigatons right now or something like that, which is about to increase to 2030 and then go down. That's the blue part. The light blue part of this chart is actually what nature absorbs of the emission that takes place. So if nature gets diminished, actually that chart becomes even steeper. It's very steep right now to get to net zero from where we are, which is the dark blue part. But the reason it is 42 gigatons is because nature or natural systems absorb CO2. So if the natural system keeps getting destroyed, that curve becomes harder and harder. So there is no way to get to net zero without nature getting not only preserved but enhanced. So nature and climate, this science has become actually much better over the last 6-7 years after Paris. And finally, the climate itself. There's a lot of despair in the world about climate that there should be. But actually the set of commitments the world has made, pre-Cancun it was about 4%. Paris Agreement gets us to 3%. Glasgow gets us to 2.6. And actually if you took all the things everyone has committed, not just countries, cities, businesses, it'll be, our calculation will be about 1.9%, 1.9 degrees or something. Again, committed. The things people have committed, not people are doing. People have, if they did everything they committed, we would be about 1.9%, 1.9 degrees or 1.8 degrees, close to 1.5, but not 1.5. The thing is, there's a huge gap between commitment and outcome. So this is, you've seen this was the New York Times, actually something similar to that our temperature and emission actually keeps increasing. We are in a crisis point last year, some scientists believe. We were almost near 1.5 degrees for that year, not across for that year. So this is the reason, I just want to say, that these three things are happening at the same time and they're very interconnected to each other. Inequality, nature, and climate. And we believe strongly you can't solve one thing at a time. I used to work for the World Bank for 20 years. And for 20 years, I believe with my colleagues that if you solve poverty, everything else will work out. And it turns out, as I worked there, that climate change is going to make poor people far worse poor, and there's evidence for that, that you have to solve these three things at the same time, and this is pretty much what we're going to talk about. So now, just want to say where I come from, what my mindset is on this topic, and what I'm going to talk about is one part of the story about energy, which is MIGHTY, is so centrally invested in. This part you guys do, you're scientists here, you do modeling. There are many models like this. This is just one of them. It shows where the emissions come from. As you can see, most of the emissions come from energy or energy systems, people in industry, transportation, in commercial use. The other part, the green part, is some we think is underinvested, which is agriculture, which is about 1/3 of emissions, about 25 to 30%, depending how you count transport or not. So in WRI, actually, we have focused our work in these two things, how the energy system will change, which I'll talk about today, but we also focus a lot about how agriculture and the food system will change. And finally, we focus on the demand side, how cities will change and to get to emissions. So we know this. So we know that energy system is that if you don't change energy system, you can't get to 1.5 degree. There's also a lot of work done about what needs to happen in all energy system, also in electricity. I am going through this quickly. I'm sure this is familiar with you, that how much has to change on the energy system itself, but also in electricity, which is the lower one in the power sector. And the point I'm simply making is how much of change that needs to happen in the next 7 years, next 6 years now, and till 2050. There's also a lot of work, also by MIT. This is a very important one from IEA, which is the International Energy Agency, which is the OECD's arm on energy, which people follow. I hope you can see the bar charts there. This is one of the models that people use. There are many models of this kind. But you can see what the model is saying about how the transition will happen globally. Not will happen, how it needs to happen to get to 1.5 degree. As you can see, if you look at 2050, coal is almost done. CCUS, or carbon capture, is there. Mostly solar and wind. There is nuclear in there. And there is still oil and gas there, with the top blue thing, the top corner, about 26 million barrels of oil and gas in the system. The funny thing is every oil company believes it's their 26 billion barrels of oil. So this is, what I'm saying is people have pretty much agreed to something similar to this. People have different models, like what to do. What are the things to do at a global scale? How will we change our energy systems? What important solar and wind will play in the system, etc. So the what part is there's a lot of progress in that, I want to point out. The story I'm going to tell you is actually is how part. How do we get to that outcome? So there's the second part of this is my colleagues in Energy Transition Commission. This is a group of people, of scientists and businesses that work together about how to get there. And the main reason, you can see this is, the first chart is on coal, the second in gas and oil, about what are the pathways to reducing it. The green line is the more difficult line. The yellow line is what we think can actually happen. The most important part of the chart is what's in the bottom. The demand side changes that needs to happen in buildings, in transportation, in power, to making this happen. So what I'm saying is not just the supply side change of how we produce energy or what we energy produce, but the demand side changes of how we actually build buildings. How do we power buildings? How do we run buildings? What kind of transportation system do we have? How do we move around? So take, for example, road transportation, which is the red circles, how important that is for oil shifting away from oil. And how important the green one, which is the power for coal, as you can imagine, that's where the coal is used most, but how important the buildings are for gas, because a lot of buildings are heated by gas in a lot of parts of the world. So the point I'm making is not only the supply side has to change, but how we use it has to change, and these two things have to work together. When we had the Paris Agreement, which was very significant, the world came together, 196 countries came together and agreed to this understanding of both sides of this change wasn't actually very good. The system that needs to change. So this was all about committing to goals. This is a phenomenal outcome of rich countries and poor countries coming together with the implicit understanding that rich countries will pay for or support financially poorer countries' transition. This is why Paris Agreement actually worked, or getting to 1.5 degree. But how we will get there, that actually wasn't that clear or explicit, the science of it. But it was a very, very important solidarity moment for countries. And that's why this report that came by United Nations last year, so Paris people came together and said, the whole point of Paris successful is every country said, this is what we're going to do. There was no kind of metric of what they need to do. It's about what they will do. But they also agreed in Paris, after some time, they'll do a study to see how we are doing. Is it adding up? And this is a report by the United Nations that shows it is absolutely not adding up. We are not, as a collective countries, getting to where we said we will go. Actually, it's increasing a little bit, as you can see. The study said we are meeting 7% of the goal. We are at a 42% gap just till 2030. So this is where we find ourselves, historic commitments, but not actually outcome. And hence, this meeting in Dubai last year, which is the last COP, actually was significant, happened just after that report, where countries for the first time, the report for the first time talked about we need a system level change. We can't just have these goals of this, we will get to 25 gigatons less or 5 gigatons less, whatever. That we need to change the fundamental systems. The first time food and agriculture was included in Dubai in climate discussion. But more importantly, in energy, they not only talked about getting away from fossil fuel for the first time, but talking about tripling renewable and doubling energy efficiency. So both the supply side and the demand side. So the world is understanding this and changing a bit about the systems understanding of this. And this is actually helped by a dramatic reduction in prices of renewable over the years. And renewable energy in most places, not most, actually all places in the world today, is the cheapest way you can actually produce energy, new energy, for new electricity. This is true, it has happened. This is happening in batteries now, solar, wind. So all of you who work on technology, thank you for doing what you do, because the technology part is actually working, meaning how to produce them at scale. In China now, I think it's 5 cents or something for kilowatt production. But the thing is, if you believed that if you could just get the price right, everything else will happen. I mean, some people might have believed that. I don't think that is happening, because the price is actually the lowest. But that doesn't mean that across the world people are actually building, changing. Lots is happening, but not fast enough. So the question is, what is it needs to happen beyond price for us to have the transition to? My belief is we need to focus. And I'm going to say my next part of my talk is not politically correct, because I'm going to say we need to focus on few countries. Because I'm an NGO, I can say this. If you're a government, you can't, but MIT you can, because you can say all politically incorrect things. Anyway, what I'm going to say is we as a society, we need to focus, because this transition will not happen in 196 countries at the same time. The question is, how do you get to a tipping point so that it happens at a scale that is required? This transition needs to happen in every country, rich, poor, middle income, doesn't matter. So we worked on the last few years to ask the question, what is it that you need to do to create this tipping point for change? And what we did is we looked at which countries are the biggest producer of carbon. This is familiar to you, the United States on top, China, India. Then we looked at which countries actually has the natural forest left. There are only 3 big countries in the world that actually has tropical forest, which is Indonesia, Brazil, and DRC. There are other places in the world too, but these are the biggest one. You can see where they are. And then we looked at where poor people live in quantity, not in percentage. And this is also familiar to you. We basically tried to draw a map of where is the biggest challenge of development and climate change we will see in the world. And we came up with something like this. If you did this, you might come at slightly different. These are the large middle-income countries where the challenge of development and climate, meaning they will produce the most carbon in the next 25 years, if nothing is done, is that. And the reason the United States is colored here, I should have, if I couldn't figure out how to color Europe, I would have colored Europe also. We feel, so that is China, India, Indonesia, Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, things like that, yeah? Mexico. These are the larger middle-income countries that faces the carbon and development challenge and nature challenge at the same time. So our argument, and the reason we have put the United States here, is we feel the United States and Europe actually will transition the first as a region. And there's a lot to learn from those transitions that these countries can benefit from. So our argument is that if we could figure out and focus all our effort to actually help these countries transition, then they will create a ripple effect of understanding technology, understanding market, understanding capacity, understanding politics of change that will actually unleash how the rest of the regions they are part of actually will bring change. So how to bring focus to bring the change. And I'm going to talk one of the countries. I was recently in India. I am from India. I was recently in India, and I observed something that I was to tell a story about. And India is a relatively large and complicated country in the story, but it kind of I've never seen so much optimism in India that I saw a few months back when I was there. They have promised, the Prime Minister's promised 500 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2030. They have talked about intensity reduction. Just to be clear, per capita emission of India is actually not very high. It's on the lower 1/3 of the world. But it is actually, if you take the total amount of emission, it is actually third or fourth in the world. And about 13 million jobs tied to coal. India is a very big coal-absorbing country in energy. So this is where India is, and I'm going to go through very quickly. This modeling, and you guys might have done other modeling, this is done by us with Niti Aayog, their planning agency. They have promised to be net zero by 2070. We think it is possible to do with a dramatic increase in renewable energy and a dramatic decrease in power consumption at the same time. This is the model that they use. But this is the interesting part of India, is that India is growing at 5.6% last year, and it will continue to grow. India's ambition of growth is enormous. For it to keep up with energy supply, India produced the second largest amount of renewable energy last year after China in the developing world, but coal production actually didn't go down because its energy demand actually kept going on, which continued to go up. So the blue part is what is required for India to produce in renewable to keep up this gap, that keep up with 1.5 degree by 2070, which is an enormous challenge. So it's not just it needs to produce renewable energy, it needs to produce renewable in a scale it actually can keep up the growth that is. And why is this important? Is that India, you can see this number, is about 520 million workers. Most of it is in formal sector. Only 80 million people are actually in the formal sector in India. The last bullet point is the most interesting. The India needs to create, just to keep up its demographics, about 10 to 12 million jobs every year, new jobs, to keep up with its demographic. That's the pressure politicians in India face, just to keep up what's happening in India. And the low carbon transition, we all talk about this transition will produce jobs. Yes, it will. It'll produce about, at the best case scenario, 3 million jobs, which is a very impressive number in most countries. But when you have to create 10 to 12 million jobs, and 3 million comes from this transition if you're successful, you can see how this is not just about the new stuff. The whole system has, this is why we're talking about energy, economic transition that India needs to go through. This is the pressure point for the country to think about how to actually keep growing. And this is not just India. Every developing country faces this pressure. How to keep growing in a way that actually reducing carbon footprint, and that makes their lives that much more complicated. This is the sweet spot, potential challenge, but a potential solution for India. India has about 400 million people who live in cities. It's supposed to double in the next 20, 25 years to 800 million people. And majority of India's economy will come from cities. One of the estimates I saw, that India people, one study showed that number of buildings that exist in India today, all of India, same number of buildings needs to be built by 2050. So think about what are the potential of getting it right. So the assumption is if you actually build buildings that consume less energy, so energy consumption in buildings is a very important part of the story, the opportunity in India. But I want to point out, I've worked in cities for a long time. I went to course 11. Cities in India are not working very well at all in any facets of the question, whether it's producing the services or it's energy consumption, things like that. And it hasn't been able to keep up with the growth pressure cities face in India. But it's an opportunity because there's huge growth there in India to see how we can shape demand in transportation, in buildings, in industry, which are all the difficult things there are. So what are we doing in this situation? We actually focus on working in states, because states in India, which are vast, produce an incredible opportunity of differentiation, and that's the story I want to say. For example, this is Tamil Nadu, which everyone will say kind of the most forward-facing, forward-looking state in India, which is in the bottom southern part of India. As you can see, the 49% renewable. It actually has a phenomenally progressive government trying to figure things out, working with businesses. We have a program actually working with small and middle-sized industry, how to, all good things that's happening there. They still have 38% coal. It's reducing fast. This is the best case scenario. The best case scenario is not bad actually for India. The other side of the country is Rajasthan, which does not have any comparable number of socioeconomic development or education outcomes that Tamil Nadu has, but it has a desert, the Thar Desert, that produces an enormous amount of solar. As you can see, 59% of the energy supply is solar. It is actually doing very well because of its solar. They actually have more solar. They're trying to figure out how to sell it to other states, which has been a difficult problem. But they're actually now working on storage to figure out how to use their solar So what we have done is we have worked, only thing I'm trying to demonstrate to you how every state is in a different place. That gives us opportunity to figure out how would you actually experiment and find different solutions to that. We work in 14 states. I'm just showing you a few of them. This pie chart looks different in every state. The most interesting one is actually this one, Jharkhand, which is one of the poorest states in India, where most of the coal comes from in India. And as you can see, most of not only their power supplies depend on coal, most of the economy is developed. The funny thing is that state actually reached out to us to ask us, help them on transition. Why? Because they also know in a very soon, coal will not be their main income. So what should they do about moving forward? But the complexity of transition is enormous in a country as big. I just want to repeat, this is true in most large countries. I'm just showing you an example. We have focused our work in these 4 categories, not only on the clean energy supply. The grid is a huge problem in India, as it is in the United States, but clean energy supply, so we have a lot of work on that. But we are doing a lot of work on the demand side of it. Because if the demand side doesn't change, it is very difficult to keep up that curve I showed you without changing. And we have a very significant piece of work on energy access. So India actually has successfully electrified most of its villages, almost all of its villages, but energy access for schools and schools and clinics remain a really big problem. And finally, and this is where I think we can do a lot of work here together, is actually on minerals and circularity of rare earth minerals, which is a huge issue India is going to face as it expands its batteries technology and things like that. So anyway, we have distributed our work in these 4 categories. Given what I showed you, it could have been done other different ways. And each one of them, we are trying to work both at the state level and the national level to figure out tariff structures, figure out how to connect the grid, how to run. India has very poor, I think, distribution systems in states. So that needs major reforms. But also how to work on storage. Storage is the next big thing for India. So they've invested all this renewable, but storage, as you can imagine, after the science says that after a certain percentage of renewable in your system, you would have to think about storage. It's not big enough for them to think about yet. The other thing is the demand side. This is where I think there's a lot of interesting work going on in industrial decarbonization, but on transport. Give you an example on transport. We work with 5 states in India, 5 cities actually in 5 states, to aggregate the bus demand, electric bus demand. And we help them procure 5,000 electric buses in one go by coordinating the specification. In one procurement, the electric bus price was reduced by 60% by aggregating this. And those 5,000 buses procured, the Indian government just announced procurement of 50,000 buses, and they then announced they want to procure 800,000 electric buses in the next 20 years. So there is lots you can do, and just in India, just public transport is a mess itself. So just buses itself would have been good, electrifying them would be even better. But that is the kind of things that you can do. The building decarbonization, I just want to point out, it has a huge potential given how much and it's been really hard to actually do that work. We work with the National Ministry on getting their public housing that they actually finance to be competitively done in a way that is green. This is a work we do, which all of you do here, I think, about predicting which of the industries will have exponential growth. So we do this is something I'm personally very interested in, is where is the J curve? What the next J curve? But this is for electric mobility that our teams have done. We run a portal that looks at system change across the world. You can look it up, it's online. But we look at 77 indicators to see how the systems in the world are changing. Because all the countries in the world, including India, are trying to figure out, among these things they have to do, which is the industrial winner for them. So they have decided, for example, Rob and I were just talking about, hydrogen is one of them. Two-wheeler and three-wheeler electrification is one of them. They're actually working on batteries a lot right now. But because they're trying to figure out how the economy will grow and which of the green strategies will allow them to grow. So this work that we do, we want to do in every country. We haven't done this for India. This is a global piece of work. Imagine if we could do this predictive modeling on industry in specific countries. We could help government to think about where the investments are for their green growth. This is a question I get all the time. Like DRC, for example, like what should we be doing? But this is a work, I think, where collaboration is much needed. We do a lot of work on access. I'm sure people here do work where we have taken not only energy, this is a map tool that we've developed that is available to everyone, which takes the socioeconomic demographic data and matches it with energy potential, renewable energy potential data, like solar, wind, what kind of energy, and gives local communities the best information about what kind of energy strategy they should be using for businesses they have or agriculture they have, which is something we basically take the supply side and demand side together in an online product. This is another piece of work. I just want to point out the reason I said people, getting people benefiting from this is critical politically for governments to actually push for more climate policy change. This is a piece of work that we do with the government in these states. Is basically bringing renewable energy to clinics, faraway clinics that actually don't have energy, so they don't have vaccination, they can't work at night, they don't have light. So it's a very, very successful program on off-grid electricity through renewables to these things that actually now been scaled across India. This has also been scaled in Kenya and African countries. The last thing I want to talk about, this is a new work we are doing on research on actually Responsible Energy Initiative, which is where I'm sure MIT would be excellent at, is where the materials are, what materials can be used, reused, or what alternative metals there are. As you know, there's a whole, globally, there's a real nervousness about where the materials will come from, where they come from today. Cobalt is discussed a lot, and what can be done so that this transition is not bottlenecked by lack of materials in the system. So this is one piece of work that we just started with the solar value chain particularly. I just want to end, all these different pieces of information that I share with you is to showcase to you, even just for one country, how actually the transition might work and what are the different pieces that needs to come together politically, socially, technologically, and financially for the market to actually support together. And this orchestration is what we feel is failing in most places. That how do you orchestrate this? This is what we, in our modest, we are a relatively large and organization of our kind, but it's a tiny organization compared to what the world needs. So how do we collaborate differently? Because different people does different things, and I strongly believe what we need is a very different way of collaborating radically across organizations like yours, or ours, businesses, governments whom we work with. Otherwise, this transition will not happen in the speed and scale we need. So my hope is going forward, we actually do things differently and focus our effort to make this transition work for people, but also for climate and nature. Thank you, Rob. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ani.
What are we doing now?
All right, so let me invite you to sit in the middle chair there, and then we'll grill you from both sides. And to do that, we have Peter Heller. and Jocelyn Fulk, who are both master's students here, one in the MBA program and one in TPP. So take it away, take it easy on him. He's done a hard job.
I know, they've written things up already.
And hopefully we'll have time for at least a question or two from you.
Great. Ani, thank you so much for being here. It's very inspiring. I know from your talk that one of your focus areas is on the demand side, and particularly in cities, and changing the consumption patterns in cities. So could you elaborate on that, and could you tell us about maybe a success story of where there has been some kind of a nudge or some kind of a prompt that has helped change, meaningfully change the consumption patterns of people?
Yeah. So I think consumption in general is the vast unexplored space here, and we can't just consume our way out of this. It's been also politically very difficult. The reason we focus on cities is not because cities is that most of the consumption takes place in the geographical area of a city. Mm-hmm. And historically, cities have been much more successful than their own national government to get innovative policies in place, and because of how cities work. The example I want to share with, so that's why we focus. We work in about 500 cities across the world to see how the relation between city government and the communities, and businesses, how can this work? The most fun example is not on energy. My most favorite current example is we run a program called Cool Food Program with many businesses, which basically simply encourages people to eat more plant-based food. As you know, eating protein that is from animals is destructive for planet. There's a whole hierarchy, beef being the worst, exactly. You all know that. But how do you change people's behavior? And we have this program called Cool Food Program, and we have just a couple of examples that has been unintuitively but very fun. So for example, we have done experiments. We have a behavioral science lab, and we have done experiments on menus. So we have seen that if you actually go see a menu in which there is a vegetarian category, and you have a thing written there, instead of if you did not have a vegetarian category and it was just part of the main courses and it was described not as a vegetarian meal some incredible way, people will choose that much more often if it was in the vegetarian. So we have worked with restaurants to change how they're simple. This is the simplest thing you could do. Change how you write your menu, because we choose differently as we see. The same program actually has worked with food vendors in hospitals and vendors like Panera, for example, in the United. I think there's 12 billion meals now that are labeled this way, in how to label it and how to present it. So in Panera, we have found if you put the plant-based food in front of the glass case versus in the back, that changes people's behavior. Only thing I'm saying is behavioral science has an incredible place to play. One of the UN report said behavioral science can impact 65% of GHG emissions. So example I'm saying is I'm very excited in what we're doing on behavioral science, and this is a huge space that we can all actually work together on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I really enjoyed your talk about the pillar of the energy access and the tool that you put out. I had a chance to get to look at that.
Have you?
Yeah, it was awesome getting to load it up and see how that works.
Poster child. That's very good.
I was wondering about, so not only in transitioning the economies that you mentioned in India specifically, your work that have dependency on coal, transitioning them into renewables, but also the 770 million people in the world that still don't have access to any electricity or energy resources. In those areas, have you had any experience in seeing that connecting them into a larger, more integrated national grid, or focusing on microgrids in those areas? And specifically when it comes to microgrids, ensuring reliability in those areas that are really susceptible to climate change moving forward?
Yeah, so our experience is not either or. It depends upon the location. So in that Energy Access Explorer, thank you very much for looking into it. Where we have found the most exciting use is actually when remote communities, so say in Kenya or Ethiopia, this is global, this product is global, but we work in specific areas that agricultural communities have used to increase agricultural productivity and refrigeration. Huge benefit, like huge. So I think that's where we want to focus on. We actually didn't see this 3 years back, this overlap with energy systems, energy access, and agriculture, which is one of our second pillar. So that's where we see the most use and most exciting use of increasing productivity on ag use. And so this, as you know, this product, this tool shows you whether it's wind, solar, or what kind of product that you can use. And the reliability part, this is where the support structure that is needed. That's why we work with the communities and the government to provide the support for this technology. And right now, this technology is very widely available, right? I mean, almost all over the world. So that's where we've seen the most, this areas that we didn't think about before, that most exponential growth that's taking place.
Thank you. I think we have, 10 minutes or so.
7 minutes and 9 seconds.
7 minutes and 18 seconds. I'm happy to keep going, but if we have any questions from the audience, I'm happy to open it up. If there are any, yeah.
Susan Kish, just a question for you. There seems to be a slight shift in the conversation around corporate banking actions over the last couple of months. Whether it was from Aramco at Surly or Dan Yergin saying, gosh, it's maybe not time, or Unilever stepping back from a lot of their... I'm sorry. Could you hear me when I started? Or Unilever stepping back from some of their commitments. The question really is, how does one react/act when it seems that there is, whether it's using the excuse of using the context of increased interest rates or whatever the argument is, how do you keep the momentum going to ensure the energy transition and net zero?
Yeah, so some of these companies you mentioned, we actually work with, Unilever, for example. And you're absolutely right, the last year, actually, not just months, last year has been unusual in two ways. What happened in the United States, or happening in the United States, from 7 specific states and people being sued on ESG. People didn't expect that to happen. We didn't expect that to happen. So we have tried to support those companies about converting that conversation. We have actually done a lot of work with other peer organizations from ESG to business risk. So it is a fiduciary responsibility of both the board and the business leaders to protect the business from business risk. And what we're looking at right now is business risk. The problem with the ESG part in the United States is the S part, the social part, because that's kind of undefined, but the business risk of on environment or climate related is actually much more defined and much more clear. So one thing is that is one discussion with these leaders is to focus on talking about business risk and how they're protecting their company from that. The discussion in Europe and other parts of the world is actually quite different than the United States discussion on ESG. But at the same time, there has been backlash there too. I mean, Europe right now, there's been, our view, my personal view is that we are just learning that we didn't focus on what the politics of climate change will be. We just assumed that if we did these things, everyone will like it. And we didn't. We didn't think about, I'm sure when I say we, I mean our whole community. We haven't focused enough of what the political processes that are needed for this to successfully happen. So I'll give you an example. We've been arguing for a long time that we need to focus on the economic transition and not just climate change. What is the economy that we need? How can it be beneficial for people? And how can it create jobs that is needed in the new economy? So if you look at the United States, Biden administration, for example, Biden administration passed 3 of the biggest climate laws in the history of the United States. The bill, the first one, the infrastructure law, the CHIPS law, and then IRA. And collectively, they have a potential to change a lot of the industry. The interesting thing in all those 3 laws, the word climate is nowhere there, right? Not one of them. And if you ask the administration what they're trying to do, they will say they're trying to reinvent the economy. They will not say they're trying to protect. So we actually support that. I think this is the way to talk about it. But I do think we are behind in our understanding of the politics that is required to support. I did a talk earlier this year about the fact that half the world this year is going to elections. More than 50% people in the world are actually electing their leaders this year. And some of them already happened. Indonesia already happened. Europe's going to happen. United States. And how will climate be spoken in those elections? So I think this is a thing that we need to focus on. Last thing I want to say, every time I talk to these leaders, so all the people who are getting criticized or backing up are leaders in the space. Unilever, Bank of America, HSBC, because they have gone out and put data out there so they're getting criticized. And my advice to them is they will be criticized. They just have to stick with it. Because if you put data out there, people will, if there's no data, if you're not doing anything, no one's going to criticize you because you're one of the millions of companies that are not doing anything. But thank you for asking.
Here in the front. Oh, plaid shirt. Great. Okay, great.
Thank you. I'm curious, reflecting back on your map of the world and especially the countries that you highlighted as highest leverage, how are we doing at creating space to take in the incredible intergenerational justice aspect of this work? I mean, recognizing it's hard enough to make good decisions to get us through the next few years, but it seems like it's really important to take into account the decisions we're making now, have this, for many generations to come, hard, potentially catastrophic effects. What are you witnessing, in your travels around the world for people's capacity to take that in and think about it in a good way?
So it's a big question. It's a very important big question. I just think I'm witnessing two things from where I interact and sit. One is the youth movement on climate has been the most impactful that has happened in the last few years. Like if what has changed the discussion most, and we need much more change to be honest, the youth movement and how they've connected globally has been the most impactful thing that has happened. Since I think Glasgow would have been the turning point, 2021, 22 I think, but since then, just incredibly positive. And the countries I talked about, except only other part of the world that would be in this discussion would be the Gulf countries that have a huge demographic bubble. All these countries except China actually have very large demographic bubbles, meaning if you did a demographic curve, their younger people are much larger in population. And that's why countries like that, there's a huge discussion, Kenya for example, huge discussion about generational demands and how should they participate in conversation and what that be needed. I don't know actually any answer to that, meaning some country has figured it out. I don't know personally, but it is very actively part of the discussion. Look at even one of the most interesting this happened, I don't know if you know this, but 3 years back, actually starting Glasgow, the United Nations decided that the countries send negotiators to these climate meetings to negotiate the deal, that they will be youth members who are permanent members of the negotiating team. And we did it, the reason I know this is we did a program to train those young people to negotiate. And so things like this are happening, but has it turned the corner? I don't know. I think we are in the beginning phase of this. But this movement has been the most impactful thing in the climate discussions.
So I think we have time for maybe one more
There's
question.
one person who raised a hand first there.
Oh, yeah.
Do you still have your hand raised? I was looking at you actually, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure. I still have another question.
We got a mic.
Thank you. It's really great that you're trying to bring together the different, oftentimes isolated industries to work together and also at different levels of government. And I'm curious to hear from you, obviously with different states within countries and also different nations having obviously a wide variety of purchasing power and access to climate finance, where are you seeing the gaps right now, even in the countries where you say we have the most leverage in accessing the right kind of capital to make these policies more, easier to accept and also kind of just make the transition moving forward?
So I'm going to use your question to just talk about capital for a minute, which I did not at all. India actually is surprisingly better off among its same peer group, meaning same income group, even how good the private financial capital markets are in this space. It's an outlier. And I don't know why. It doesn't have better policies than Kenya or Indonesia. It's an outlier. It's a very, very thriving space in financial capital markets. Money's not flowing anywhere else except India. Not at a huge scale, but it is. I think finance is a huge problem for everyone. Every country I'm talking about here, except the United States, where most of the money is going. So today in the world, we spend about $1.2 trillion in climate-related stuff. Most of it's domestic finance. Most estimate is that we would need about $2.5 to $5 trillion a year to meet this gap. So you can see the scale of the issue here. Most people believe, so the organization I worked in, the World Bank, so all kinds of development assistance, meaning World Bank, bilateral money, all kinds of money together that are concessional, is about, well, last year was about $260 billion or something like that, $250 billion. So there's like a $1.5 trillion gap or $3 trillion gap in this. So everyone thinks it's going to be supplied by private capital. So just last weekend was the spring meeting of the World Bank that I participated in many discussions. The whole discussion was about leverage. How do you leverage this money? How do you de-risk it? But there's an enormous gap in finance. So no one actually has enough finance to do that curves I showed you. India will not be able to do that with domestic capital. There's no chance of that. We won't be able to do that even with the flows it has the best flows right now. It won't be able to do that. It's something fundamentally different has to happen in the global financial architecture for us to finance 2.5, which is the lowest number, $1 trillion. Because private capital is private capital. I mean, they are set up to provide returns to whoever put money in there. And when United States subsidizes investments here at $360 billion, most money comes here, right? I mean, this is not a shock to anyone. Or goes to Europe. I mean, most money that's spent on energy right now goes to United States and Europe. 3% of it goes to Africa, which has the world's highest solar potential. So something fundamentally different. The answer to your question is there's a lot of discussion in the world today is how to make the financial flows work, and we are part of it. I want to underline that if people think if they just sort out the finances, then everything else will sort out, it won't happen again, as you can see it in India, because finances are working in some scale there. Thank you for asking.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time. I think
thank you.
We'll be welcoming Rob back out.
Okay. Well, let me thank you once again, Ani, for coming, and everyone for joining us. I think it's been really informative. See ya. Happy Earth Day.